I wasn't sure if I should bring this up, but
Look out.
I've got something I heard from a credible source that... Whoa, welcome back to the It's Just Coffee podcast. I'm Kirk Pearson, and I'm joined by a very special guest, Mark Dundon, founder and owner of Seven Seeds, co-owner, I should say.
Co-owner, correct. Thank you.
So just to give a shout out to your other co-owner.
Bridget. She's actually at home with the flu at the moment, which is, not good.
Yeah, my dad copped a bad flu last week, was hospitalised.
Oh, really?
My dad's one of those very grumpy Australians where... So he had been in hospital for 3 days, just didn't tell anyone because his biggest hate is when people fret over him when he's unwell.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, be on death's door and just don't tell anyone. That's great work, Dad. Thank you.
Well, I can't remember when Bridget had a day off. So for her to have a day off, it's pretty sinister for sure.
Yes, it is going around. But welcome and thank you so much for coming up. This is an interview I've wanted to do for a long time. We actually haven't met until today.
No, that's true.
You're someone I've long looked up to in the industry, and it's a bit of a don. You may not accept this praise, but
well, yeah,
I'm giving it to you anyway.
Wait till the end of the interview, Tiger, and we'll see how you feel about it then.
You're a low key guy, but. Yeah, again, wonderful to have you on. This has been an interview I've been looking forward to for a very long time. What have you been up to recently?
Recently, I think really just working hard, trying to get back after, I suppose some setbacks with COVID and things like that. Focusing on Melbourne, really looking at Seven Seeds and I suppose next steps and just, I suppose, consolidation. Coming out of COVID, it was fairly difficult times. I've never worked with people as much as I have in the last, year and a half. I think, human resources has just been over the top.
Yeah, okay.
And that's understandable. I think people were fairly, damaged or, affected during COVID. So, yeah.
So what does that mean in practice? So you're in the stores sort of managing things or you're...
In the stores, really looking at, I suppose, our approach to people. Mm-hmm. It's hard because, as hospitality is getting squeezed a little bit with, margins and those sort of things, I think it really is important to understand where your business is being efficient, where it isn't. I think efficiency is key at the moment to really look at getting through, making sure you can survive. So that, in a business like hospitality means, managing people.
So not only do you have Seven Seeds, but under that bandana umbrella would be Traveller. And then, of course, Brother Baba Budan.
Correct.
Yeah. So can I ask you, what are the origins? I know, but for the audience, what are the origins of the names Seven Seeds and Brother Baba Budan?
Okay. Well, I was told that, I can be a little stubborn on the odd occasion. I was told to always name my business exactly the same name to build that brand, which I didn't really... I didn't really want to go with
all
that.
things considered, it's worked out.
I suppose. I think other people might disagree, but if you look at Sonali, which is Sonali Uba Alm, that guy's name was he's sort of credited with looking at coffee and realizing it as a potential.
Should we mention you're the founder of that too?
You can if you want to.
Okay.
I think you just did.
Hot take.
But the reality is that I was naming it sequentially through people who I thought were really interesting in coffee and had some influence, starting with, St. Ali and then going on to Brother, who was the Indian, cleric who went to Saudi Arabia, to Mecca, and then came back through Yemen and, stole 7 beans, which is where the 7 seeds came from, going back to India. And that's really how most of coffee, got out into the world. The Clue, which is one of the places we did in, Gertrude Street, was a French naval captain who took it to the Caribbean. So it was sort of, sequential naming, but then unfortunately everyone else realised what I was doing and they started doing it as well. So,
You did it before it was cool.
Won't mention any names. It's hard when you can't keep on going when that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, there's only so many. I'm going to format this the way we usually do. So we've got a bit of coffee news, then we're going to interview you, then we've got a few other segments I'll go through later. But let's hit the coffee news button, please, Liam. I've only got one today. You like how we got music to this?
That's good, yeah, it's nice.
Liam's talented with that. I've only got one piece of coffee news today, and that is that, Sabrina Carpenter? Do you know Sabrina Carpenter?
I don't. No.
Okay, wow. Sabrina, 2 weeks in a row someone said that. Simon said it last week. But Sabrina Carpenter, former Nickelodeon star, now pop singer, she's been posing on the Instagram of Blank Street Coffee. We were just talking about Blank Street Coffee off air. Anyway, so I think she's got this hit song called Espresso. Wow. You may have heard that. You might not know it, but you've heard it. Anyway, so I feel like there's a bit of an endorsement coming on. Maybe it's Sabrina Carpenter getting into coffee, full time. Some notable people investing in coffee at the moment.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
so we did a whole podcast episode about that. You'll get to listen to that.
Hey, no one's knocking on my door, but hey.
But anyway, I feel like that's a hot take. I reckon Sabrina's getting involved in coffee at some point soon. I mean, why wouldn't you? She had a coffee flavored ice cream. Now she's getting into coffee.
Okay.
Usually I've got more informed news, but this week we're rolling with that. I had some questions. I'm going to start interviewing you by. I was reading about you online. I've read about you a couple of times, but there was an interview that you did with, I think it was Lama Zocco a couple of years ago. And there were some quotes in there that I found really interesting. So I'm going to read some of these quotes. I've got, I think, 4 in total.
Yep.
And then we'll discuss them. Work for you?
Well, works for me.
All right. So when talking about 7 Seeds in the interview with Lama Zocco, quoted to us is taste of great coffee and to be able to reward the hard work that goes into producing coffee. I love crisp, clean, subtle, tropical fruit flavors from those high-grown Caturas, the bergamot of the geisha, and the sweetness of the bourbon. I'm concerned process-driven and infused coffee being more easily recognized will outcompete high-grown quality coffee. I want people to understand how hard it is to produce quality coffee and that it shouldn't come from the fermenter.
Correct.
We're doing hot takes early.
Yeah, we are.
Oh, yeah. So what do you mean by that? And what do you want to input on people when they're listening
Well, I think, when you look at, tasting coffee, cupping, or even, whatever. Like when you're tasting coffee, I think it's really good to identify what is something that be created in a situation like a fermenter or process. So the danger with having that in coffee is that you get rid of, high-grown natural coffee flavors. So if I can produce that in a Vietnamese coffee that's grown at, 800 meters, like it's going to really challenge, people who have, plots of land in Panama or Colombia or whatever. So there's a danger of losing that, high altitude, clean washed coffee if everyone champions, a flavor profile that's made pretty much in the lab or in the fermenter. Like you can see a lot of things coming at the moment with, supernatural or, these sort of special processes that are fairly much, descriptive, and it seems to be a new name every week. And the danger with that is that it is produced in the fermenter. So, you'll get people who are doing it a lot cheaper than a lot of, coffee farmers today, and then you'll see that industry die. And you can sort of see a little bit of that now. Like Brazil's doing really well with some of these processes and things like that. And it's not so much the actual... like you can like that coffee, that's fine, but you need to understand that that's not the taste of coffee.
Yeah, it's very much like an input or artificial or something.
Correct. It's like I suppose putting raspberry into beer or things like that. It's like it's sort of it's an ad.
And I think there's a bit of murky water. There's a lot of conjecture in the industry on this topic at the moment because I just saw a post on the Finca Hartman Instagram page and they're one of the most esteemed coffee farms in the entire planet. And they sort of had publicly said, listen, we don't co-ferment any of our coffees. And I'm assuming they're responding to accusations or
perhaps
something someone said online or publicly, whatever. And then even in competitions, a lot of people accuse the winner of using a co-fermented coffee.
Well, I think one of the things that came up with a Cup of Excellence in Costa Rica, I think. And so like you can sort of mimic flavors that you get from, high grown coffees, those tropical fruits, really, really clean. And like a classic example is we had like Ukro, Ethiopian washing station, they got their new, Panagos, which is an aquapulpa. And the guys, when they set it up, they just left a little bit too much, parchment on the coffee. And so that year, the coffee was beautiful. It was really, really fruity and stuff like that. But that was actually, a process of, the problem with the Panagos. We all really loved it because it had this sort of fruit level to it. And there's nothing wrong with that coffee. It was delicious and beautiful. But I think you need to realize how that was created and have control. And I think one of the exciting things with coffee today is people are really starting to get that control with, processing. And it hasn't come to coffee really much before this. Like I think the Panamanians and the Brazilians really have that together. A lot of other people do now. But what you're seeing is people really starting to look at it as a science and really do that. Whereas before it was chucked in the fermenter overnight, 15 degrees tonight, 8 degrees tomorrow night, and you would just have varying lots the whole time. So now you're seeing a real dedicated approach to that.
A question just rose in my mind as you were saying that, and that is like you've been in the industry for 2 decades.
Too long.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot, and I kind of feel like I've been in the industry for about nearly 10 years now.
Yep.
And even from when I started to now, it's changed enormously. Yep. So what do you think is the biggest change you've seen from when you started? Because sometimes I have this anecdotal feeling like I don't actually feel like coffee tastes better than it did 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I specifically talk about coffees from Ethiopia.
Yeah.
That's one country where I was like, I really enjoyed that coffee a lot more in that sort of 2016, 2018 era. And am I old? Am I uncool? Am I wrong?
Well, no, I think you're right. I think, honestly, I think the machinery, advancements don't make that big an impact. I think, coffee 20 years ago, when you had a delicious coffee, it was great. Obviously, we've had geisha discovered since then, and this sort of approach to varietals, and now we're having this processing sort of revolution a little bit as well, which is really improving it. But the reality is that, coffee is pretty much what it was. You could get, a wild Ethiopian, from the West Malaga sort of area of Ethiopia out towards Sudan, still grown in the bush and tasting stunning. Like, to make a Central American person cry, you take them to that place where they're getting the coffee from. It looks totally tortured. You look at a manicured farm somewhere else and the coffee just tastes absolutely stunning. So, and that sort of still exists. It's still there when you go to Ethiopia, if you can get out there.
If anyone wants to see that, I think there's footage on The Coffee Man, which is Sasha Sestic's movie that he did where he actually went and looked for wild coffee cherries in Ethiopia. I never really thought of it until I saw that.
Well, there's producers out there who are still collecting. Out in those regions. It is their approach hasn't changed because it is still, I suppose, quite third world, and so they don't want to change anything. So coffee is advancing at that producer level fairly quickly. But the biggest changes really is that, I think, you're seeing a real revolution at farm level. The difficulty thing is that as you see that revolution, you're seeing, the workforce, get out of third world and want to be graphic designers, not pick coffee.
Yeah.
So you see this, all the Colombian kids or, want to work in the city.
Yeah.
So we have some real problems with, that sort of labor and, how you can pay people to pick coffee.
And I'm kind of sabotaging my own show notes here, but I must follow up on what you've just said there. What do you think a solution is to that issue? So, I mean, I think even there's a degree of that to agriculture in countries like Australia.
No, there is definitely.
Kids wanting to leave the farm and go pursue other things because it's hard yakka. So to speak. So.
Look, I think it's got to be we had a couple of producers' kids come out and work at Seven Seeds. Raul from La Soledad in Guatemala and Felipe from Brazil. Faf, Fazenda Ambiental Fortaleza come out. And I think, I really am against Coffee Hunter or whatever. Coffee farmers have been doing it for such a long time now that I'm not going out and discovering anything. I'm going out and looking at things that they're introducing me to or whatever. So we thought that, for them, it's important for them to see what we're doing with their coffee and really important for them to understand what's happening at this end, because it's just as important to really for them to, be introduced and have an understanding. Felipe went back and set up, a couple of cafes and did really well in Sao Paulo. Raul's killing it, a young person who's still interested in coffee and working the farm as his dad gets a little bit older. So I think it's you really sort of need to work with people. I think the tyranny of distance is something you need to overcome.
Yeah.
And the difficulty now I think in Melbourne is that no one's travelling. No one's really travelling properly and having a stake in that end of where the coffee comes from.
So I guess this would be a pertinent point for people that are entering the industry now might think, oh, I want to be a green buyer when I'm older.
Yeah.
A lot of green buying could just be receiving samples from a company nowadays and assessing those and picking coffees off a computer rather than traveling to Origin and procuring your own offering. Would that be fair thing to say?
Like it's changing a lot, and I think the internet's having a lot to do with it. And I think some of it's good. Like I think Green Square and things like that will be really interesting from a shipping point of view. Like it's taken us a long time to get to a position where we could buy coffee.
Yep.
So Bridget and I had to save up, 750K, when it comes to actually buying your coffee. Like today, if we buy, our Guatemalans, they won't arrive for another 4 months and they'll be in our store for another 6 months. So that's 10 months of paying for something in advance to actually, before you actually get the money back for that. So, and it's a risky business. You can get coffee that's, not as great as what it was or whatever. So you have to really, have a good relationship and be tied into it. So that's difficult for someone who's entering into coffee.
Yeah.
I think there is some people who will, facilitate like, a lot of the spot, suppliers here or, green suppliers. And I think people should really embrace that and, try and get, some relationships going, at least understand, where the coffee is and what it's impacting.
Yeah. Now, this is an interesting point, and I think it's relating to the next quote of yours that I want to read out, is that you said 7 Seeds publishes a yearly report showing all coffee purchases with a breakdown of the purchase chain. We are contributors to the Specialty Coffee Transaction Guide as well as data donors. Sustainable coffee requires valuing the coffee chain and paying appropriate pricing. We show our actions and our payments of.
Yep.
I find that a really interesting thing to say. Obviously, thank you for bringing the impact report like you did, and thank you for publishing such a thing. I think you and perhaps Proud Mary would be some of the few roasters in Melbourne that do. So, firstly, could you explain what the impact report is, and then the value of it?
For us, it's just a sum up of what we're doing for the last year. Like you won't see specialty coffee mentioned with us in our literature or taglines or whatever, like because we don't believe that it's a term that's actually associated with good coffee. So for us, we feel the only way to really show what we do is to be transparent. So we show the prices that we pay across all the coffees that we purchase for the year. We also talk about some of the projects that we're involved in and what we're trying to achieve. So it's a little bit of the good and the bad and things like that. Like if you look through, it's all there to see. And we would respect people to do that. If people say that they're doing, a great job or, hey, we're sustainable and all that sort of stuff, I believe people should publish, and show me the numbers realistically, because I do find the industry very heavy on talk, but very little on, actual figures or the real.
Explain that.
Well, everyone who's working in specialty coffee is, doing a great job. That's what they're saying. That's what, their, taglines, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. For me, I don't believe it. I'd love to call it out and say, look, hey, prove it. So for us, I don't think people are backing out what they're saying. And I think it's across the industry. I think you were talking about something last week, someone using the supermarket's beans as specialty.
There is a, I guess, definition of specialty coffee, and that is that, things that score 80 points and above. So we have a coffee scoring system, and 80 points of or above fit that definition. And then, what you're referencing is that we had sort of a hot take that went semi-viral about cafes using Aldi coffee, which large supermarket chain, and it fits the definition. Yeah. And you can actually get it to taste good, but they'll say we're using specialty coffee roaster, but beneath the bench they've got the low cost Aldi blend. Yeah.
So to me, it's a misleading term. And I question the 80 point. Who's judging the 80 points? And 80 points to me, 84 points. Should be at least minimum, or I would expect if you say something is special, if you say something is, there has to be something denoting it from a commodity coffee. And I don't think 80 points.
The mustard?
No way.
Okay.
No way. But anyway.
I like that, and I think that's very honest of you.
Yeah.
The next one I wanted to read out. Coffee producers come in all shapes and sizes. some rich, some poor, some creative, some not, but generally all are a dedicated bunch wanting to work hard and get a decent income from something they love, like us. And this is something, again, we were talking about just before we got on air. There's something that I consider the Ferrari driving producer.
Yeah.
You know, people that producers that have, you know, chefs at their house and assistants and can afford luxury vehicles and things like that. And then there's the producers that aren't in such a similar situation.
Yeah.
And so, I'd love you to explain that point as well.
Well, I think, you know, you look at, Carmo Coffee in Brazil, you know, they're quite a wealthy organization, but they actually do also include a lot of their community in that particular area that they operate. So they've been very inclusive and they're doing really well. That's great. You know, he's making a lot of money. Same with Panama, like the Panama producers, when they were threatened with, you know, bungalows and retired people taking over their coffee growing area, they really teamed together and started, you know, Best of Panama and a whole lot of things like that. And it's sort of
sorry, I wasn't aware that was a threat.
Well, yeah, like, you know, if you go to Boquete, like it's where the retirement capital of, you know, the States, a lot of people are heading down there because of the actual climate and things like that. And so land value was threatening a lot of, you know, area down there. So like it sort of all fell into place a little bit, I think, with, you know, the Petersons and, you know, the discovery of geisha and all that sort of stuff. But they teamed together as a community, you know, and produced, you know, this, you know, concise vision of what Panama, you know, geisha coffees are. And I think it's really solved a lot of problems for them in regards to, you know, producing a coffee that sells for top level. And they're all, you know, got great coffees. They're all helping each other out. I remember someone told me when I was down there judging at Best of Panama that one of the rules that they have is that if I am a farmer and you come as a producer, as a roaster, I've got to introduce you to somebody else. And it shows like a commitment from a grower level to really, you know, I think look at, you know, an approach for the whole sort of area, which I really, really like. And I think it's been successful.
So there's an element of camaraderie around
there is, there is, most definitely. So if, you know, if I was a roaster and I went and saw you, you would have to introduce me to, you know, Rachel Peterson. So it expands the network, you know, they could sell to me as well and things like that, which I think is, you know, very... And she's, you know, she's given away so much seed and coffee to people. And, you know, the original seeds came from Francisco Saracen, pretty much, his father, Don Pachi. So, like, they've been very generous to the whole coffee community. And the coffee community works really, really well. Like, you go to really poor places like, whether it's Ethiopia or whatever, you know, and you can see, you know, a dedication to producing this, you know, product, which is sort of second to none. You can, at the moment, you can see some frustration at, you know, in certain areas just because of, you know, them not receiving enough cash and things like that, growing other things. Like, I think a lot of people don't realize that coffee farmers also grow other stuff as well, usually. Yeah. And so, you know, if coffee isn't doing that well, you know, on the world stage, it's going to, you know, they're going to plant something else.
Do you find that some of these coffees are getting too outrageously expensive? Because, one thing I worry about is that the high-end coffee that I'd love for everyone to be able to try might become a bit like wine, where, you know, so some of the best stuff is reserved for only the heinously rich. I don't know that coffee will ever be so appreciated like wine is, but I'd hate to know that, you know, an Esmeralda geisha is only attainable by someone who can afford so much money. And so, like, on one hand, I'm thinking, well, that's fantastic that someone's coffee can be so valuable. It's good for the industry in a way. But it's also a worry that I don't want to see coffees like that be, you know, reflection of class.
Look, I think there's some cultures that value the auction platform, and I think that's where those coffees sell really, really well. You can buy geisha that's not an auction lot from, you know, Peterson's and still bring it into Australia for a reasonable price. And I would encourage people to look at that, you know, reach out directly and things like that. So I think you're always going to taste those particular coffees. But, you know, if someone, you know, in a market in another country has, you know, better exchange rate, better standard of living in Australia, or what, like, you know, for a long time the Japanese could buy that sort of product. It's not so much now. Obviously it's Koreans and Chinese and people like that, because, like, it wasn't so much the taste, it was that award that made that coffee valuable. And I think in Australia we don't value that as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
Like perhaps in countries like the Middle East and
yeah,
some of those countries,
exactly. Like 2000. Like, and there was always this thing. Have your $80 cup of coffee or $120 coffee. There was almost like a competition to have that most expensive coffee there. We don't dig that so much here. Like, just give me a good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, that's the Melbourne vibe a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think the last one was relating to specialty means nothing. There is no specialty watchdog saying, show me what you pay. Show me the quality. Show me the specialty. It's increasingly a market term used by roasters who are using commodity-based coffee to sell a slide, a griff, underhand bullshit to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we've already sort of touched on this.
I've sort of gone through that. But like the thing is that like if you really want to be, an association, like there's no one looking after coffee. That's the big thing. So, in my time in coffee, there was a long held myth by the media that, a latte costs 52 cents. And that held for a long, long time, like 6-7 years in the media, that would get trotted out, regularly. That wasn't the case. So like, the hard thing in coffee at the moment is there's no one really saying, hey, as an organisation or as an independent body, I'm going to stand up for coffee and really give you the information about what, the journey it goes through and what a special thing it is and how we should protect it. If I can go into the pub, next door and pay $15 for a pint that's water, hops and, malt from, 2 kilometres down the road, I think we need to really act and look at some of the special, aspects of coffee that should demand a higher price. And,
how can we give it a facelift? How can we give it that level of value?
I think there needs to be, I suppose, an approach. Like, no one really wants to form anything to really govern it, but there should be, some sort of decency, I suppose. If you're saying something is sustainable or, this or that, there should be, some standards behind it to back it up.
One question I really wanted to ask you is about climate change in coffee.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a massive threat that we don't really realise yet, and even changing weather to an extent. And it's already there's been significant impact in some countries that you just don't typically hear of. Like I think it was Hurricane Irene or something that hit the Honduras. And that was devastating.
Yeah.
And then landslides in Rwanda.
Yeah. Well, like if you look at El Salvador, with rust and things like that, like El Salvador's changed so much. Like it used to be such a solid, market, buying El Salvadorian coffees, but it's changed so much that it's, it's just, and that's climate change because of the altitude there. They top out around 1900 meters. So they're having a real problem, I think, just with the change in temperature going up, which, promotes pests and, rust and all that sort of stuff. But that's occurring everywhere. Like it's, like being in Ethiopia, like recently they were talking about it doesn't rain this time of year usually. It's raining now. So you can see coffee's changing. People talking about Kenyan coffee's changing because of, weather and things like that, not tasting as good or whatever. Like a lot of it is, myth or whatever, and there is normal changes that happen. But climate change really is impacting fairly heavily on, that high end of coffee,
And so I guess what I get from that, what you've just said, is that maybe there's an impact on flavour in some regards.
Well, I think so. Like when you look at, Kenyan coffee, I think it can go through a couple of bad years where it's, really drought affected and not tasting that, that great. It will come back and things like that. But people are definitely, each of the coffee organisations like Ana Cafe Guatemala or E-Cafe Honduras, working on varieties that work and are more sort of sustainable and weather resilient and pest resilient to these sort of conditions. So, coffee producers have recognised that for many years now and are really trying to combat it. So it's definitely affecting.
So that's the impact now.
Yep.
What do you think if things get significantly worse? What do you think the practical impact on the roaster, the cafe, the consumer is?
Well, I think prices will definitely go up because, like, when you look at a mountain, if you're going up in altitude, there's less and less, land. And if you really want to look at, not degrading lands, you have to try and keep coffee farms where they are rather than expanding into higher altitude areas as well. So it's going to affect quality. It's going to affect all those sort of aspects of it. And, quantity, like as other markets come on and start drinking coffee, I think it's inevitable that coffee prices are going to go up. And you can see that even today, the C's going up, exchange rates are difficult as well. So, I think you can see, change on the way.
One thing I definitely would like you to sort of explain to people listening to this is the difference between fair trade and perhaps direct trade. So in your impact report, I think it was somewhere in the 60% range that you're buying direct trade?
Well, it depends. Like what we do is we would work with, so for instance, we fund, like Technoserve is like a organisation that was set up as a non-profit. That was disbanded in Ethiopia. Two guys Ansha and Moata asked us whether we could fund them to set up their own office. So we funded them, set up an office. That was with us, Reuben Hills and Paramount Coffee Project. We funded them. So we put those guys down as a partner with sourcing. We don't say it's direct. So anyone on the ground there who's helping us, so you might have Benjamin Paz in Honduras, who is a producer but helps other producers to export to us. We will put them as a working partner and not direct. So if we buy direct off a farmer and they do the export, we will actually put them as direct. So it's probably wouldn't be 60, but it just depends on what you class as direct. Well, for us, it's like just trying to tell you exactly what we do.
And what caught my interest there was when you were referencing buying coffee from Guatemala before, and you're obviously spending a fair bit of money on it.
Yep.
You're kind of backing them when times are tough as well.
Yep.
I feel like that's not something a lot of roasters do, and
it's very, very hard because like the reality with Guatemala is like Tenango, we buy off Freddie and Aurelio. We've been buying off them for 10 years. I think it's our 10-year anniversary this year. They are growing better and better coffee. Their coffee is stunning. So at some stage, they will have to go to the highest bidder. Like they're selling some of their coffee, to other people and things like that. But if they can get more money for it, and we can't sell it here in Australia, they're going to have to sell to, wherever, And we would love to, take as much as we can for the price point. But the reality, is our blend now costs us around $30 to produce, maybe a little more depending on, what's happening. So for us, we need to, we can't, have a cost of production of, espresso blends sitting at $40, $50. We would never be able to, operate. So there is price constraints in Australia as well that we have to fit into, unfortunately.
Let's go now to some of the more high-end stuff that you work with.
Yep.
Every year I am excited when the Takesi release happens. So Finca Takesi is a really famous farm in Bolivia. Bolivia is my favorite coffee producing origin. I went there a few years ago, absolutely loved it. Didn't go to Takesi, although it looks picturesque. Have you been?
I haven't been.
Okay.
No, Matt, one of our roasters went a couple of years ago. We haven't been back since COVID. We were going to go last year, but couldn't. There was something that came up and we actually had to stop. We were supposed to actually go again this year and catch up with Coffee Collective, Mariama, and a few of the other guys who actually. So there's only
Monogram, Intelligence.
Yeah. So those guys, we were all going to catch up, but it didn't happen. Couldn't organise.
It's a truly terrific coffee every year.
Yeah.
Just I feel like that's kind of the climax of what coffee is, that high-grown wash geisha.
Well, I think the Java was great this year. It was a stunner, it really was. But they look obviously very high farm, growing fantastic coffee.
Where did the conversation start bringing that coffee in year on year?
I think I was introduced by Jeff Watts. So I think, Takesi was looking for some other partners around the world and Jeff suggested Seven Seeds in Melbourne. So yeah, which was great.
Well, isn't that funny? Because right now, back then they're looking for other partners. Yep. Right now, I think people would be banging on their door for their coffee.
We get a little bit of, an email back from someone who, every time someone tries to hit them up, they send it to us and
Would you like to part with some so that...
Well, no, they want to keep, they want to keep it fairly tight because there's not that much coffee, and they want
to dry coffee and things like that during harvest is incredibly challenging.
Yeah. So and they want people to pay good money for it, and they want the product to be represented in the best way as well.
Yeah.
So I think you have to fit those standards, and a lot of people just want to have the green and say that they've got that without perhaps spending time.
I think it's one of the best coffees in the world, along with coffee from another farm you have a relationship to, Santa Lucia.
Santa Lucia. Yeah.
Santa Lucia. I first had this coffee when it won the Cup of Excellence.
Right.
What year was that, 2019?
Oh, we've won it 3 times, I think.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'll have to. Yeah. We're not allowed. Well, I shouldn't say we're not allowed to enter, but we don't enter anymore.
So do you own part of that farm?
So I do. Yeah. Erwin Murish and I co-own the farm. Basically, it's a fairly small farm next to a bigger farm, Sierra Azul, which is Erwin's farm. And basically, he was looking for a partner to buy that. He pretty much needed the cash to buy that small farm. So we bought it together. It was a little bit more of a model farm, still fairly big, produces quite a bit, but put a lot of different varietals into that farm. And I've had it for 10 years now, so it hasn't returned a cent at this particular stage. But look,
Will we get there?
Hopefully, fingers crossed. But coffee producing is very, very difficult. But with that farm, it does produce. Yeah, that's a great coffee. It really is that geisha.
Yeah, and at the time, I think it scored like 94.84 was the final cup score.
Yeah,
that is incredibly high. The difference between 90 and 94 is huge. I always have you seen the show Breaking Bad?
Yes.
I always use this analogy. Remember when Gail Bedecker he gets the meth from Walter White, and he says, "Oh, my meth is 97% purity, and I'm incredibly proud of that."
Yeah.
And then he says, "Oh, but Walter White's is 99. I would very much like to meet this cook. That's a work of art." That's kind of like the same thing. If you've seen that, listeners and viewers, that difference between 90 and 94 is just so big.
It's like, it takes a lot of work to get a coffee to that stage. I think Erwin...
what happened that year to get it that big?
Look, I just think it all just clicks. Like, I think it's there's a lot to do with what's happening on the farm. The farm manager who produced that has unfortunately passed away with COVID, I think it's a lot of things that happen. And, that coffee manager did a great job. He really did. And I think he got that coffee to a standard which is very rarely seen. And it was great to, I had no involvement realistically other than, investing in the farm because everyone needed the cash. But the reality is it's great to be involved in seeing that happen, going from when it was planted to, actually winning.
Yeah. And that coffee was just... so I had a business called Sub-Zero Coffee a few years ago, and serving just basically getting some ridiculous coffees and serving it. Also, never really returned a cent. Right. I'm in the red from that one.
Okay.
It was one of the ones that stood. It was the first coffee I bought. And it was stunning. So
good.
Tip my hat to that one. That's one in the library that drinking coffee is kind of like having a library inside your head. And that's one that will probably stand out forever. So
well, it's good to see those varietals going everywhere. Like geisha all over the world, like SL28 going from Kenya to all these other places. That's one of the other exciting things. And I think you're starting to see a lot of that starting to come out now.
Yeah, SL28 grows well in Costa Rica as well. Is that right?
Probably. I think Costa Rica does have, Costa Rica, they went through a period of doing a lot of semi-washed, coffees, which, I didn't think suited that variety. Anyway, another story.
What is your hope for the coffee industry? What would you like to see more of?
Oh, God. Well, no, for me, I think it's really, at the moment, I think it's going through some tough times. I think from, climate change, I think a lot of people buy in who probably don't have the best intentions for coffee itself. It's more monetary. So those sort of things are very challenging for coffee. But I think there's a lot of people who are passionate about coffee who will still drive it. I went to a Jeff Watts event recently, Oscillations Coffee. And it was about, having that sort of, I suppose, drive to continue with goodness in coffee, and I can see that in, a lot of people in the industry that they do want it to.
Because I feel like some of the things that you promote and, want to put forward don't probably have the amount of sex appeal in the industry that other things do.
Well, it's hard at the moment because a lot of people entering the industry in Melbourne probably aren't like, we were 10, 20 years ago, which was passionate and really wanted to do things that's more business oriented. So someone who's coming and buying a cafe or whatever doesn't quite, understand it as much as we do. So they're looking for a business opportunity, and $23, for specialty coffee a kilo sounds great, rather than 36 or whatever. So I think there's those things to overcome to show separation in quality. I think public education is a really, really important one, and I think we're getting there with that. And I think you can see a bigger separation now with coffees. I think people are buying some really bad coffees that you can taste around town, and I think you can taste who's doing good coffee as well. So I think, and people drinking filter coffee as well is a big plus, I see. Yeah. As you were talking before we went on air, people are selling a lot of filter coffee, which is great, and people are really embracing it. We've just released some premium batches and people are just digging it. Yeah, I'll pay $6 for that or for this or whatever because it's just super delicious, And I think that's really positive to me.
And I think that's one thing that we as an industry, if we were to talk directly to coffee consumers, is we would love to sell you more of this product.
Yeah.
A lot of the best coffees are roasted for filter because, you can sell them retail and people can brew it at home.
Yep.
B, it's quick. It's so quick. You pay for it, you get it, bang.
Yep.
I would say that a lot of cafes don't make it well. I mean, that might be me just...
I think you really need to be focused on brewing and understanding where, you want it to be, having an understanding of taste and all those sort of things, which a lot of people don't spend the time on, they should, because it can really taste stunning. Like an example, my son, who is like around 20, but he's been brought up on filter. And so he just, he can just go, that shit or whatever, he's just got that taste. And I want that for everyone in that age group to be able to be like that.
I wasn't sure if I should bring this up, but
look out.
I've got something I heard from a credible source that your son is quite a, let's just say, introverted guy. Would you?
He's fairly,
a shy fellow.
Yeah.
I heard he went on a hot date and he left some things to the last minute. And let's just say...
Who's your contact? That'll be interesting.
Well, I will not disclose my sources. So, I mean, if your son's friends are watching this, maybe they can, give him a little... Confirm, deny, but I'm going to ask you point blank on air. Did your son leave things to the last minute and require you to pull some strings to secure a date at some of Melbourne's finest restaurants?
That's correct. He did. Yeah.
It is true.
It is true. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So he did. He left things to the last minute, and luckily Luke from Chippo did let him in through the door for that Saturday night.
But that required a bit of,
it did.
Text message from dad. Okay.
It did. Yeah, it did. For
sure. For context here, you have a cafe next door, so maybe there's a bit of a relationship there.
Yeah, which is good.
You got to lead on your network.
Well,
you do.
There's no shame in that whatsoever, you know?
I might have incriminated your poor son there, but...
hopefully he doesn't hear this because he'll be even more introverted after this.
Any follow-up appointments from, did it go well?
Yeah, it's gone well. No, I think it's gone very well.
Okay,
so which is good. It's success. Success.
Excellent. Yeah, we love to hear that. That is an excellent one. Yeah. But back to batch brew.
Yeah.
We would love to see more people buying batch brew because, again, I feel like batch brew is just that low-calorie option people didn't... Like, if we're appealing to people's drinking preferences, like some people think, I need to have skinny because I need to lose some weight or,
No.
Batch brew is the low-calorie, delicious, hot, great on a winter's day.
Yeah.
It's freezing at the moment here. And
it is. It's kind of like it really does work, perfectly for all of that, all those sort of things. And I think, as people embrace it, and if you make really good batch brew and people get into it, it's definitely the way to go. It's reasonably priced. That's the other thing with coffee. If you're looking at, the grams and how it makes a beverage, it's pretty decent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've got a question. Just talking about filter, saying that a filter coffee sitting around $6 or $7 is justified and everything. Would you agree or not? I feel like as a buyer, as a customer, I love filter as well.
Yep.
Should batch be a similar price to a V60 filter experience? And which way would you put the best way to experience filter?
The real thing at the moment is costs behind you're making it. Like V60 should be a lot more expensive. I think for us, V60 is fairly inconsistent. So on a bar, if you're actually, serving people and things like that, you have to really stop and do a V60. And I don't see that often. I see the technique change through that. So
very disruptive at times.
Yeah. So I think for us, a batch is a really good option. And a premium batch, like if you use a tone or something like that, where it's sort of a little more sort of standardized, I think that can really, really work. But for us, I want to try and deliver consistently in a work environment that's throwing,
For me, if you're not charging $15 for V60, it's not worth it. I mean, that might be an extra hot take. People might think I'm a jerk, but it's kind of like a chef making a meal. It takes the same amount of time using expensive ingredients, more expensive coffee, most likely.
Yeah.
I just don't see it as worth it unless you're paying that much.
Well, I think you've got to stop, walk, do that for the whole time frame and produce it to who's having it. I think they should be paying 15 for sure.
Yeah, it should be an experience.
But like, I think you can almost get a better result off a decent batch brew. And I think that's for the people a little bit. And if you do, like we were doing the Java Takesi through batch for, I think it was $6, $7, $8 or whatever.
Great value.
And like, people were hitting that hard. So like, to me, I think that's one of the things that we should be heading towards. Like milky drinks, they're what Melbourne's been brought up on. It's actually pretty much sweetening coffee with milk to be able to palate it, So I think the problem with that is that what happens is, great coffees get lost a little bit.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't always put the Takesi Geisha as a latte or cappuccino.
That's right.
So
exactly.
It's like getting a really good whiskey and pouring Coke in it.
Correct.
So
yeah.
My final question in the interview side of things is, once you're finished in coffee, what do you want people to think about Mark Dundon? What mark do you want to have left on the industry? No pun intended.
Good question. I just think to really promote like cooperation with growers and the end result realistically, like retail level to where it's growing, and to really tie that in. Like I think this is an area where the digital space hasn't really been tapped into enough, is my personal belief. Because to give you an example, I think there's so much room in the industry to connect people with the producer. It's not like you're going to get your customer to go to Guatemala and visit, one of the suppliers that you buy off. I think there's so much untapped space in that sort of virtual reality, or, even getting a QR code linked to a well-produced video that, explains these things really well and in depth. I get it. It's hard. Not everyone wants to apply the resources to that, but I just think that's the biggest miss as an industry that we've made. There's not enough things for the consumer to draw to, and you have to make it easy for people these days. That's just the reality. I suppose you do. Like, I think for us it's disappointing because it takes so much. It's such a time sink. Like, and if you're thinking about like roasting coffee, and really people work hard. People work hard in cafes. If someone's standing around, you're losing money. That's pretty much the same in a roastery. So everyone is busy, and to sit down and really try and produce. Like I know some people do it really, really well and save costs in other areas. But I think if you really pledge to, paying good money for coffee, it can be difficult to have those production standards. I think a lot of producers are really involved on the gram, whatever, have a presence online, and I can see that really coming into the fore in the next few years. I think producers should really start to chase down who's representing their coffee well and who isn't. So those sort of things will be good. It'd be good to see them have a presence here as well.
That would be interesting as well. Boost their and I guess accessibility to that is only ever going to increase. You look at things like Starlink, for example, like getting internet to people in remote places. Should only really increase the accessibility for people to do that sort of thing. Yeah, well, there's most of our producers are on online and accessible. So yeah. We have a segment that I didn't really alert you to, that is rapid fire questions. Okay. So I'm going to ask you 20 questions now in quick succession. You've got a minute to try and answer them all. Okay. So you can't pass on any of them. You're going to have to give an answer. I mean, I've let previous people pass, but I reckon you've got this. You ready for rapid fire questions?
I'm ready.
Liam?
Hey, it's just questions.
I think it's good.
Yeah, we're going to make it a little tense while we do it, all right?
Yep, sounds good.
And your time starts now.
Coffee order?
Batch.
Washed or natural?
Washed.
Co-fermented, yes or no?
No.
Geisha or Caturra?
Geisha.
Guatemala or Peru?
Peru.
Filter or espresso?
Filter.
7-Eleven or Coles Coffee?
Pass.
Instant or McDonald's?
Instant.
Beer or wine?
Wine.
Simon and Garfunkel or the Bee Gees?
I'm going to go Garfunkel for sure.
Favorite Bee Gees album?
Oh, I haven't got one, to be honest.
Best coffee podcast ever?
This one.
Most underrated coffee venue in Melbourne?
Ooh, that's a hard one to answer. No, I can't answer that
Get a
one.
pass?
Yeah, pass.
Favourite sport?
Skiing.
Best dinner in Melbourne?
I'd say Tippo.
Best breakfast in Melbourne?
I'd say us. Or, yeah, go on.
Coffee country you don't buy from that you want to?
I would say, Sudan.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask you the last 3 questions anyway. Takesi Java or Geisha?
I'd go this year Java.
Best barista you've encountered?
That's a hard one too, isn't it really? Tate Brown. Let's go with that.
Tate Brown. Okay, I don't know Tate Brown. Last day on earth. What coffee are you having?
I'm going to have Santa Lucia, Geisha.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Can't blame you there.
No.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, well, this is time for the all-anticipated, the final segment of today. I think the one that people must stick around for nowadays. I've had people, the weird thing about doing this podcast, we're a few episodes in now, and people actually come up to me in the street that said, hey, you said that on the podcast. I love the hot take. And I'm like, wow, I forgot about that.
Well, I hope it's hot enough. That's the question.
Well, yeah, and people hold you to account as well. There's some spicy stuff in the comments on YouTube. And anyway, Liam. Sounds very Tame Impala-esque, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
But,
Big compliment. Thank you.
Mark, you had a hot take that I really want to hear. Can you please, down to the barrel, tell people?
Okay, so we are sitting in Woodstock, the old Woodstock pizza venue, and just recently he's been discovered, the guy who used to be proprietor here and the actual, the pizza maker and all that sort of stuff, recently discovered in Norway making pizza after being basically having a hit out on him, I believe. So hiding away in Norway. And I used to come here with my wife's father and mother for dinner with our, son, hang out here when he was here. But hospitality's got bad in Melbourne.
Okay, all right. So you might have just endangered the safety of someone.
I think, yeah.
Well, we'll see. Perhaps people follow him to Norway. I don't know. Norway seems like a pretty secure place.
It does, but I think he's sort of on the move now.
But this place has been shot at multiple times. So there's bullet holes in the wall over there. We might even post some pictures of that at some point.
The history of Golden Brown HQ. I love it.
How was the pizza back then?
It was good. He was good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he was really good. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing some of the talented people that do things in this world, but they've got this dark side to them?
Well, I think he just had too much money outstanding. I think that was the deal. Right. But but there's a lot of stories, like that. Yeah.
Could make a pizza though.
You could.
Brilliant wood-fired pizza oven.
Yeah, it's an amazing oven back there. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you ever fired it up?
No, but
I think the boys have. Yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of put the question to the guys of hosting my 30th birthday, which is in a few months here. So
right. Why not?
We've said it a few times on air, so there's there's support of the masses, I think.
Yeah,
it's a bygone area, the whole gangster era here in Melbourne. Yeah, like one of the baristas when she was working at Ray drove past, was riding her bike past Brunswick Club when old mate got topped in there. So she saw the whole thing.
I feel like criminals these days have a little less class. I mean, it is being a criminal, but they don't operate with the same level of esteem that they used to.
No, maybe not.
These days they film it, put it on the Instagram. Anyhow, my extra hot take with 2 sugars is fresh coffee is not the best. All right, so I have this issue with customers saying, I want the freshest stuff. I want it within 2 days of being roasted.
Yeah.
You don't.
No, you don't.
Let us do you a favor.
Yeah.
I'm actually having a lot of good results with coffee that's into its 3rd week post-roast.
With this weather at the moment, 3rd week, 4th week, drinking, 5-week-old coffee home is delicious. So, I think it's just a real hype. And, I hate drinking coffee under 4 days. It tastes terrible. Yeah. Well, not terrible, but it's just it's too much. And
especially, I think the best example of this is with milk coffee, like a blend, for example. If you can age it to 3 weeks after it's been roasted and then serve it, you'll have the best results.
I think if you speak to some of the Italians, they're aging that out a little bit longer than that, quite a bit longer than that. But it actually works, for what they're doing with it, for sure.
You don't want fresh coffee. I mean, to an extent, you don't want it too old. You don't want it 1 year old.
Yeah.
But you don't want it too fresh.
Yeah, especially in winter. Yeah, give it an extra week, 2 weeks, I reckon.
Yeah. I mean, Anyway, it has been such a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
I'm so glad I got to finally meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Yeah.
Where are you off to next?
I'm just chilling at the moment, just working really hard. I'll take a bit of time off in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
You might need to guide your son on organising the dates.
He's got it down. Since then, he's doing well. Yeah.
All right, well, maybe I could learn a thing or two from him. But anyway, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
There, Governor. I'm definitely stealing, which one is it?
The Roger.
Well, yeah, I'm going to take the Peru.
Take the for sure.
So I'm pinching this one, Liam. I get the Roger.
Then I get the other if they're being left.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
No worries, thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay.
This has been another episode of It's Just Coffee.
Do it. Can you join us for this gimmick? I don't think it's really your shtick, but we usually say it's just coffee together. So
okay, ready?
This has been another episode of
It's Just Coffee.
Yes.
Yes.
We got that. That's cool.
Fantastic.
All right.
Wow.
Thanks, guys.